And I'm thrilled to death because I get to talk today to Tabitha, and I am really looking forward to our conversation today. And so, if you have been following us for some time, you know this is it's our third annual conversation that we have every single year about dating. So, before I get into the conversation and what we'll be talking about today, Tabitha, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. My name is Tabitha Westbrook, and I'm a licensed counselor. I have an office in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and Flower Mound, Texas, and we specialize in complex trauma and domestic abuse and coercive control. And I'm really excited to be here with you.
Thank you. I am thrilled to death. So, if you're joining in, if you could go ahead and let us know maybe where you're watching from the comments, maybe if you've seen our previous dating interviews in the past 3 years, that would be great. I can drop the link to those in the comments when we're done. Or hey, you want to find them and drop a link, go ahead. But yeah, so today you're like you're going to talk about this again, and I want to explain our heart behind this conversation from Call to Peace Ministries perspective, because I know there's people who have permanent view or of marriage that support us. I know there's people that are like, I don't want to date. The purpose of this is we want to inform and educate people so that you do not end up needing our services again. So, ideally, we want to see you safe and prospering in your relationships. So, we will be talking a little mostly about dating relationships, but we'll be also talking about relationships with friendships and everything else, because all of that plays into if you want to move into a dating relationship. I do not, and I'm sure Tabitha will agree with me, do not recommend trying to figure out what safe relationships are like if you've not yet done that with a female friend first. It is not good to start there. But so I'm looking forward to kind of jumping in today's conversation. And so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We love to keep it conversational. And so I'm kind of going to start with my first question, which is, let's just get in from the very beginning. What does a safe relationship model? What are some key characteristics of a safe relationship?
So I'm going to give what is going to sound like a super churchy answer, but I think it's where we start, honestly, is they look like Jesus. They are mutually respectful, they are trustworthy, they are emotionally safe, and they have effective communication. So that's kind of like our overview, is they look like what we would think they look like, but maybe haven't ever experienced.
Yes. Wow, that is really good. And I think for me, something I learned, I love to touch more on this too, is it's really hard to discern what does relationships that are like model like Jesus look like after abuse. Like I feel like for me, I was very confused, and it's just like you're unsure what safety even looks like or feels like because you're used to chaos, you're used to earning love, you're not used to feeling safe, and that always feels like, oh, weird. I felt a need to be drawn to those who made me prove my worth to them. So, can we talk more about that? Like, where do we begin with our bodies and our hearts and our minds when we're coming out of abuse and we need to learn safe and healthy relationships?
Yeah. So when we come out of an abusive situation, oftentimes our safety button is broken. And safety is a bit of a nebulous word because it means different things to different people. So I'm just going to give a quick definition of it for us for today so that we're all kind of on the same page. And safety basically means that it's a trustworthy space you're not going to get unduly hurt in. Now, in any relationship, somebody's going to hurt your feelings. And so if even in my long-term friendships, there have been things I've had to work through with people over time, just because we do people-y things occasionally. And just a reminder that abuse, coercive control is that pattern of power and control. So we're all going to do things once in a while that are not godly, loving, kind, good, all of that stuff. It's when it is a pattern and it is pervasive that it is a problem. And so just keeping that in mind, right? Because I think sometimes, especially when we come out of abuse, we're really scared, right? And if somebody does something even a little bit shady, we're like, I'm out. But we want to look for, is it a pattern? We want to take some breaths. We want to let our body get habituated, which means used to. It's a fancy word for getting used to, a safer, more calm, less chaotic, honest environment. When you have been abused, you're oftentimes waiting for that other shoe to drop. And you are in that hypervigilant state of, when are you going to betray me? Because everybody else has. And so that is a very internally disruptive set of feelings to have, and it can make it hard to be in a relationship. And so it really is going slow, moving over time, observing what's happening in the relationship. What is that level of mutuality? And letting our bodies get used to something different. I've worked with so many clients who find a really wonderful partner and are like, this is terrifying. And I don't know what to do. This feels wrong to have someone who's not going to yell at you and not be terrible to you, or that you can disagree and they aren't, enraged, which, is, if you are an abuse survivor, disagreement is like the cardinal sin to an abuser. And so it feels really unusual and strange to your body and soul when someone treats you with respect, which is terrible. It's not supposed to be that way. It's not what God intended, but that's what a lot of abuse survivors experience.
Wow, that was really, really good. And I can relate to every single one of those things. I think something really helpful that my therapist taught me is that it's important to look at people's hearts too. I think when you're discerning relationships, and yes, conflicts are inevitable. I have had conflicts with people that I consider my safest of safest people. And it's learning, I think, as an abuse survivor, how to go to somebody when they offend me quickly and be like, this hurt me. When you said this or acted this way, it hurt me. And seeing their responses, because I have learned that those who are for me and conflicts I've been through, their response is always, I never meant to hurt you like that. I am so sorry, and being able to take ownership of that. And then also being able to hear too, maybe you did something else that, not that, the way they hurt you was justified, but maybe you did things as well that may have offended them, and being willing to listen to those things and take feedback. So I appreciate that you shared that, because I think that's really important. Can you talk more about the tools that we have to discern when there's conflict? Because one of the things my therapist told me is that when there is conflict, the first thing in our mind is it feels like we're supposed to apply the same mechanisms of escape that we did in abuse. Say if something happens and it feels emotionally abusive, or it feels this way, we automatically say, oh, I'm out, I want to run. What tools can we use to discern, okay, one, is this a safe person? Is their heart genuinely for me? Two, how do I confront and deal with these things?
Yeah. When we come out of abuse, our bodies are on high alert. And so it doesn't take a lot to kind of hit that tripwire and for us to go, wait, is this okay? One of the biggest ways to discern a relational safety over time is time, right? What is the pattern? What is the character of this individual? Are they consistent over time? I really like Brene Brown's Braving. It is an acronym that she uses for the anatomy of trust. And it's from a business book. It's essentially a business book called Dare to Lead. And I really like that because it does create some clear parameters and statements around what trustworthy looks like. One is boundaried. That's the B in Braving is, what are the boundaries? Does this person cross your lines all the time? If you say this is something that I'm okay with or not okay with, here's why. Do they honor that? Do they honor you? I look at boundaries like a fence. You can open and close that gate, and I can decide who's in my yard at any given point in time. And sometimes I might need to say, you need to leave my yard, but if the person that you're letting into your gate, into your yard is trustworthy, they're going to honor that you don't want them stepping on your tulips or like uprooting your trees or what have you in that space. So do they adhere to boundaries? Are they honoring of you as a person? Are they reliable? Do they say what they're going, do they say they're and do what they say they're going to do, right? Like, if I say I'm coming over and I'm bringing soup, do I come over and actually bring soup? Unless for some reason I'm sick. Now, if I call you and say I have 105-degree fever, right, that's a problem. But like, you don't want me at your house for certain, I'm certain at that point. But if I say, hey, I'm making dinner, or hey, we're getting together, I meet you. I actually come. I don't ghost you. I don't like introvert my way out. I would never introvert my way out of anything. We all know that. But there are people that would. But am I honorable in like, yes, I want to have connection. I do what I say I'm going to do. Am I, able to be talked with? Like, can you tell me things? Am I a vault? Am I trustworthy in that regard? Or am I spreading your business all over the place? Like, your reliable, safe people are not sharing your story unless you've asked them to. They aren't going to tell your business to someone else. they have integrity, even in the hard times. They're not going to betray you. And they're going to always have a generous opinion of you. They're going to always give you the benefit of the doubt. So, if, let's say, Lauren, you don't call me when you're supposed to, when you said you were going to, I'm not going to be like, well, gosh, man, she doesn't care. I'm going to be like, man, maybe something came up, maybe, the dog needed a vet visit or, urgently. And I, didn't know about it. And I'm going to give you that generous outlook because you're trustworthy, right? And I'm trustworthy. So it's really looking at some of those things over time, and saying this person is reliable. They are who they say they are. And they, are for me, like I think of my own best friend, like, no matter what conflicts we've ever had over life, and there have been some, she is for me. She is fiercely for me, and she loves me well. She loves me enough to tell me when I'm being silly, which I appreciate. She's like, you're not looking like Jesus here. And I'm like, ooh, thank you for that. It hurts a little because I'm like, oh, that's sad. I hate that. But like, she loves me enough to say it, but she also loves me enough to praise the good things. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. I can't believe you're doing this really cool thing, whatever it is, So there's that, beautiful mutuality that we have in our friendship, that I know she's a safe person for me, and I'm a safe person for her. And that's been borne out. It took years to be able to be in that place. So also don't rush it, give it time. You don't have to know, 2 days after you meet someone, which I think also is a little bit of a throwback to being love bombed by an abuser, right? Like, how many of our survivors have said, well, in 2 weeks, he was like, and God told me you're the one. And I'm like, well, I hope God told you too, And so it's like, it doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be furious, and letting our bodies get used to that, and giving that progression of time is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is really good. I'm like, wow, I'm like everything you're saying, that checklist there. I'm like, that's so good. And it's so good to look at ourselves too. I love when you say that, is say, okay, as survivors, a lot of times we've learned mechanisms that maybe aren't healthy, but also being able to look at ourselves and say, hey, what ways can I grow and improve as a safe person? And so I think that is a really good list to look at and be like, okay, this is where my boundaries are of who I allow in my inner circle. I have to see these things consistently over time, and so then also looking at myself, do I show up that way consistently over time? And if I don't, being willing to own that and grow, because really, in all honesty, we're going to hurt each other and not always show up that way or things like that. And so it's being willing to forgive and extend that mercy and that grace to each other. So I appreciate that. And this is kind of where I hang up. I feel like, I don't know, it's on my heart and my mind, and I thought I'd ask you about it. I think a lot of times that survivors, and I know for myself too, it's easy to look at the good in somebody and to that's important. It's really good. Don't hear me wrong, please, everybody. We do want to see the good, but where is the balance between I see you're good, but at the same time, there's ways in which this is not healthy. So, what does that balance look like? Because that's kind of how our mentality was in relationships: is I see his good. I see he treats me so good sometimes. So I just keep enduring a cycle because I see the good and hope it'll come out. So, how do we stop that cycle in friendships too?
Yes. Oh, such a good question. So this is what I'll say about it. We actually were talking about this in advocacy class fairly recently, I feel like. There is manipulative niceness. This is what I think they used to call the honeymoon phase back in that phased approach. It's manipulative kindness. And when we see the good, is it really good? And who is that good for? And is it really the sum total of their character? And I think, again, it's patterns over time that we have to look at. And it's like, oh, if I see potential, oh, but they have so much potential. Okay, why aren't they walking in it? I have questions. I think that's a great thing to ask, quite frankly. If it's like, but they could be, but why aren't they? So I think that's kind of where we go. What is the overall pattern of this person's relationship to me, whether it is an intimate relationship or a friendship? What is their orientation? So like, if it's, man, but sometimes they're so nice and I want more of that, it's like,
Yes.
I have questions. If it's, man, they had a bad day and overall they're good to me and kind, and the bad day is like truly a bad day and it doesn't repeat every third Friday or whatever, then okay. If it's once a month, my friend is a little bit angsty because maybe it's that time, we women do those things in those moments. Or maybe she's in perimenopause and she's just a little crankier, but she's not ugly to me. Right. So like in those places, it's like, okay, what is the overall tenor of this friendship? What is the overall rhythm? And God never called us to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of another person.
Mm-hmm.
So we do not have to say, but they're nice sometimes. So I'm going to give and give and give and give and give for that one drink of water when they are kind to me. Like it should be far more mutual and respectful. It should be far more, for each other's good than me serving the other person, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yes, that does make sense. Thank you so much. I'm like, wow, I'm learning a lot here too. I love everything you're sharing. And so, yes, if y'all are like tuning in and seeing more people jump on the live, please let us know if you have questions. Like I said, we're always happy to take questions. And so this kind of makes me think too. I'm going to give a little shameless plug here. A lot of the retreat. I know a lot of people are probably watching this right now, and you don't have what you call really a safe friend. You're coming out of abuse, you feel alone, and it's really hard. And so I'm going to tell you, I have actually met a lot of people. Actually, a lot of my really safe friends, I met them at the retreat. And maybe they live near me, maybe they don't. So I encourage you to, if you don't have a community, there is ways to meet other people who are walking this path of safety, and maybe come to our retreat in 2025. I'll drop a link to that eventually here in the comments, and connect with other people that understand what you've been through. And so is there anything else that you want to add about friendships that maybe I didn't ask, or you were like, this is a really good point to know about safety of friendships before we move on to dating relationships?
Yeah, I would tell people don't be afraid of conflict. And I know that's really hard, right? Because like I think the worst words in the English language are, can we talk about this later, right? Or like, can we talk after work or something? That strikes fear into the hearts of many. But conflict can actually be very connecting. I would rather have a challenging conversation with someone who loves me than for them to become resentful toward me because we didn't work through something. So, for example, if, let's say, Lauren, you and I were hanging out and, you got caught up in something and I felt really missed. And like, gosh, Lauren, man, that really kind of hurt. If I just take that home and I'm like, well, Lauren clearly doesn't care about me. And so I'm just going to, never talk to her again or something, you're going to be like, what happened? I'm so confused, But if I say, hey, Lauren, when we were hanging out, you seemed really distracted. You're on your phone a lot. You really felt distant and I really felt missed. And I'm wondering what was going on. That's the other thing is like, that's the charitable, that's that generous opinion. Like what was going on for you? I'm not making an accusation toward you either. You
Yes.
might say to me, you know what, there's been a lot going on. My daughter has had some friendship struggles. This was the other mom that was texting me, and I really was distracted and I didn't mean to miss you. And I'm really sorry about that. I can see how you felt that though.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to be repairing, right? You're going to go, oh man, like it really mattered to Tabitha that I was present with her. And I'm going to be like, oh man, Lauren's going through some stuff, and we can kind of meet each other in that and love each other while in it. And I think that is such a beautiful thing because conflict, when we really do it well and look at, what's happening and why did this hurt and all of that, and we can see each other better. And we all want to be known and cared for. Like
Yes.
we are built that way by the Lord. We were built for community. And so when we like rub each other a little bit the wrong way, again, not in a pattern and not with maliciousness and what have you, then when we come together and go, hey, that was really hard. Or if somebody were to come to me, hey, I'm noticing this, like somebody, not just a person on the street, right? You got to have relational equity to have hard conversations. But like if someone were to come to me and say, hey, I'm noticing there's this pattern in your life and I'm worried for you. I'm worried about what I'm seeing. Is everything okay? What's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Then we can talk about it because sometimes we don't see stuff. Maybe we're like, dating is someone who is a giant walking red flag. And because we want to be wanted, we're ignoring all of those things, which those red flags do not mean it's a carnival. And so someone who loves us and sees that comes to us and goes, hey, like they're a walking red flag energy. And I think you might want to think about some stuff. I might not love hearing that because, man, I want to be wanted. I want to be with somebody.
Mhm.
But if someone loves me enough to say, like, you might just want to ask some questions, then hopefully I will be humble enough to sit with that and go, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, oh, man, and have to wrestle through that.
Wow. Yes, that is so good. And I'm like, my mind is like thinking through some of my, say, friends and people I have in my life. And I just want to say too, is that we're all, no matter how godly, I don't know how to say godly we get or whatever, like we all have flaws. We're all going to hurt and offend each other. And we all have quirks too. There may be certain things that that this person is something they struggle with, and that's just the way it is. And you have to learn to not sin pattern, but you have to learn to embrace people for who they are and their own weaknesses and love them through that. It doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable when they do something that crosses you and offends you, but it's just understanding too that's part of safety is that I am loved and accepted as I am despite my weaknesses and who I am, and I feel safe in that situation. I certainly have my weaknesses in life and I have my good qualities as anybody else, but it's like learning to embrace the both and learning how to support one another in that. I have a lot of friends who are very process driven. I am not. I am somewhat, but you know what I mean? Like I like the meticulous, organized people that plan everything out by a schedule. It's my sister, and they help me with that and things like that. And so it's just good to embrace the both and realize we both carry gifts into the relationship and to not be like, oh, this person's like this. I don't like them or they're like that, but just not everybody's gonna be like you. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that too?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, we are separating out quirkiness and differences from destructiveness.
Mm,
And so I think that is something I just really want to highlight as we're talking about it. So, there are definitely, I have some insecurities in my own life at times. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe that wasn't good enough or whatever. And I have friends who will absolutely call me out on that, who are like, man, you need a good swift kick in the tush, go do the thing, And one of my mantras is I do it scared. So some of the things that, like, if I start like a business line or something like that, I might be like, oh, I'm a little nervous about that, but I do it anyway because I do it scared.
mm,
And so my friends, sometimes I'm like, man, was that a good idea? Will be really encouraging and say, hey, man, we know you're really scared, but like, go for it. You got this,
mm.
And so they are kind in my insecurities. They're not exploiting them. They're not minimizing me because of them. They are gracious to me in them. And they also encourage me not to stay in them. I think that is the hallmark of any good relationship is loving well, loving each other well, and seeing and encouraging the best in your people, whether that's, again, an intimate relationship or a friendship. Who encourages you to thrive and to grow and to be all that God called you to be. There's a friend of mine, he and I are actually presenting at the retreat together about, friendship, which I'm really super stoked about. And he always saw and always has seen, still does see the things that sometimes I don't see that God has given me. And he is such an encourager of those things. And he'll say, like, hey, you've got this. Or like, oh my gosh, I see this amazingness in you. And like, that's life-giving. So wonderful and kind, to be like celebrated and encouraged in places that maybe I don't feel as strong.
Mhm.
And also like places where, like, and again, and I also do that for my friends too. So it's again, that both and. What are
Mhm.
we doing over time together to encourage, to push to Jesus, to help us each
Yeah.
other look more like the Lord?
Wow. Yes. Thank you for sharing that too. I think that's really important too to highlight, especially coming out of abuse. We definitely were minimized, and it's easy to be like, oh yeah, of course this person thinks that I'm not good enough here or thinks I need to grow here, which is important. They should be given feedback, but they should be somebody that's your biggest champion. And I think that's really important to look for is does this person get excited when you tell them and support you when you tell them the news of something new you're doing or adventure? Do they look for the good in those things, or do they be like, oh, you can't do that, or oh, I'm not sure of that? I think that's a big red flag there, just kind of throwing out there. And I think it's easy. I know for me in my life, it's easy to think, oh yeah, that person's right. I really can't, and not to realize the dynamics of what's really happening, because you're feeding those lies and people that are around you. will feed the good. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And so is there anything else you want to add, or do we want to jump into dating?
Oh, let's talk about dating. Sounds like a good time.
I'm so excited. Thank you. Well, I've been looking forward to getting this part. So, once we now establish what does healthiness look like, and we've had this great conversation here, let's talk now. You've got a safe community, because if you don't have a safe community, you don't need to be dating. Just no, you need to have the safe community first, safe, supportive people that you go to process with. Because I'll tell you, I have safe friends I talk to about everything with. Anyway, in dating, you just need that to bounce back off of. And so let's talk about that. So you've got your safe community. You're a couple years out. I know some people have differences with that, but I would say you need to be a couple years out probably of abuse and really done your work. And you're like, I feel like the Lord is leading me to find somebody else that's healed. Where do we start in, okay, I've never been in a safe relationship before. Maybe what does this even look like? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So first and foremost, do your work on healing, right? Nobody gets out of an abusive relationship unscathed. I wish that we did, but we don't. And so if you try to jump into the dating pool and you are bleeding out, you are going to attract one thing, and that is sharks. And then you will be like, wow, why is that chewing on my foot? So, and I don't want to vilify desire either in this, because it is absolutely okay to desire a partner, to desire a relationship, to desire to be remarried if that's something the Lord has put on your heart. Now, there are people listening to this who are like, I am good, thank you, but no thank you. And that is also okay. So there's not like a one right answer. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, the desire of my heart is to have a partner, and you're listening to this and you're like, the desire of my heart is to absolutely not do that right now, or maybe even ever, everybody is right and fine and good, and that is okay. And I just want to normalize that, because I do think that sometimes in the church there's this overemphasis, if you will, on getting into an intimate relationship and getting remarried, and just be where God has you, and really be checking in. I will start with that. And as far as finding a partner, all of the things we said about friendship are true, because if you look at the research on relationships, the thing that is the most important is the friendship above all else. And you cannot do good conflict if you do not have good friendship. Because what are you basing it on? What's your baseline? And I see, especially in younger folks, an overemphasis on physical attraction, connection, compatibility, physical intimacy, those kinds of things. And those are all great and important, but they are not primary, because there's always, especially as you age, good gracious, the likelihood that physical things aren't going to work the way they once did. I mean, I crossed the 40 line and realized I can hurt myself rolling over in bed. And I'm like, that's new, And so there are going to be physical limitations if you are on this earth long enough, and Jesus should tarry, that perhaps some of those physical connection points aren't going to be the same, if you will. Mm-hmm. What else do you have in the relationship if that is your only or your primary? So you got to start with friendship. So all of these things, first and foremost, any intimate partner should be a good friend. Mm-hmm. Now, they do not complete you. This is not Jerry Maguire. That is the most ridiculous statement on the planet. You're already complete. Jesus did that for you. You're great. But they should really be a good friend. They should be for you. They should be interested in your flourishing. They should absolutely celebrate and help you hone and expand your gifts. They should challenge you gently, kindly, and without abusive behaviors, when necessary, right? I mean, I wouldn't want a yes partner. I'd want somebody to tell me hey, that was not your best move there, Tabs. Maybe don't, but they're doing it from a place of love and kindness without abusive behaviors. They are not domineering, right? They, even if, you hold the complementarian viewpoint of, your spouse, if you're a female, your male spouse is a leader, they aren't domineering. They are not a dictator, right? They really care about your opinion and feelings and perspective, and they see you as the helper and partner that Jesus designed in a relationship, right? They're your partner, you're their partner. You're not being minimized. You're not being pushed aside. You're not being told, well, I'm the head of this household and this is what I'm going to do, and like, oh gosh, no, I hope nobody ever says that to me. That'd be bad for them. But, those are things that we aren't hearing, right? We're hearing, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. What do you think about it? What's your perspective? And they're honoring the brilliance and giftings that the Lord has given you.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
a lot, I know.
Yeah, no, it was great. I'm just absorbing it all here. I'm like, yes, that's so true. And I love what you said. And I'm glad we started with friendship now that we've built that and into what does this friendship look like? Can you tell me maybe some of the things, let's start people who are dating. What are some of the things you could look for that you'd be like, wow, that's really a green flag? And I know we talk a lot about red flags, but let's go. What are some green flags?
Oh gosh, respect, right? Respect of who you are, what your boundaries are, you know, respect for your intellect and the giftings that God has given you, that they respect who you are as a person. They're open and honest with you. There's not any of this like, oh, you don't need to worry about who's following me on Instagram and whose photos I'm liking or whatever, right? There's not like, oh, who's on my Snapchat list and my private snaps and all that shenanigans. Do people even use Snapchat still? Whatever,
Oh,
TikTok, whatever it is, whatever the people use these days. They're honest. There's a vulnerability there that isn't a shady, I'm hiding things from you, unless it's like, look, I bought you a birthday present. Could you maybe not go and like look in my closet? Fair enough, but it's like, then you actually get a birthday present. So it wasn't a lie either, right? Again, honesty, openness. There's a lot of emotional and physical safety. So you can say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And it's not weaponized against you.
mm-hmm.
Scripture is not twisted and misused to control you. They are, they enjoy talking about the word of God with you, not to tell you what to do with it, but to hear what the Lord is saying to you. Right. So like, it's a very different kind of conversation. When they pray with you, they're not praying, Lord, help this woman, help her to be like, my goodness gracious. No, don't do that. It's, man, Lord, help us flourish. Help me love her well. Help her love me well. Like, right. Like, there is that mutuality, that kindness, that power under that we saw from Jesus in it. They are trustworthy. They have done all of these things to show you that they are people of their word. They are, they're reliable. They're going to do what they say. If somebody says, I'm going to call you, and they need to call, or they need to have a real good explanation. Like, now, like if they're an ER doctor or something and they don't call you because, emergency surgery or what have you, fair enough. But they're going to tell you like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't call. Like we had this, really serious case come in. I was really sucked into it. And I texted you as soon as I could after. Okay, I can go with that. As long as they're actually an ER physician, right? Like, I mean, I background checks are not a bad idea. They have healthy boundaries and they respect yours. They are not trying to take physical ground from you that you are not giving, right? There is no handsy. There is no like, well, I mean, like Jesus wouldn't be mad if we slept together. They're not pushing against your physical boundaries.
Yes.
They're not trying to get something from you and to consume you. Right? You are not an object to be consumed by a partner, period. You are a partner, right? You're not a sex toy. And I realize that's a very bold statement, but I know that sometimes when we get on these dating apps, it's almost like how some men talk, which is terrible. I'm like, your mama would be so disappointed in you, I hope. Like, how did she raise you? Were you raised in a barn? I have questions. But I think they're going to be really honoring of your boundaries, and they are going to have their own. They're going to be men of integrity who have their own boundaries and who are not, pursuing something they ought not. And they're going to be able to handle their own feels. They're not going to fly off the handle and say terrible things to you. They're not going to punch holes in the wall, slam doors, tear off in the car, anything that happened like that in your abusive relationship. They're not going to be doing that stuff.
Yes. I love all those things. And I think that the difference between I have found abusive relationships versus for relationships is this person should desire to love you well, as you're mentioning. Whereas in abuse, they're always looking for ways that you can love them better instead of focusing on themselves. Now they need to appeal to you if you're doing things that are unloving, but Their focus is on how can I love you, not
Mhm.
how can you love me by being more submissive. Will you give me enough sex if we get married? Will you do this for me? Will you do that for me so that you can be loved? And that is a very big difference that I have found between the two is what are their motivation? What's driving them? Who's first? Is it themselves or is it you? Because if it's
Mhm.
themselves, it's going to continue to be themselves the whole relationship. So I have found that a helpful tool to use.
Yeah, and when they do, I've worked with so many folks who have gotten remarried after abuse, and one of the things, like, the green flag guys, if you will, when their partner is triggered and they're like, I do not understand what is happening here, and I didn't say these things. I don't know why they feel this way. One of the most beautiful things is I'll get like a text from my client, and they'll say, "Hey, can my husband come?" Or my boyfriend come to therapy with me and we get the releases. And I'm like, absolutely. And so I'll be able to help them understand trauma responses and triggers. And they want to understand. They're like, I don't know what happened. I'm not this other person. All I said was like, hey, did you empty the dishwasher? Because I was just curious because I was going to empty it if they hadn't. And they like freaked out, and it's like, oh, well, there's a story behind that for some people. Right.
Yeah.
And so, as they get oriented to, oh, okay, so this is a trigger for my partner. How can I enter into that and care for them well in it? And, over time, help them rebuild those neural pathways that signal safety instead of harm. And they're in it. Like, they may be frustrated. They may get angry when they're like, but I'm not the guy. They may feel all of those things, but the way they orient toward their, partner is, but I do want to figure it out. I'm here for you and I want this to work. And so they're willing to be flexible. They're willing to learn and grow, even if it's not something they understand completely. And that's okay.
Wow, I'm really glad you mentioned that, and that kind of leads me to one thought I want to say on that, and then leads me to another thought I want to ask you about too. Is that is it's important as abuse survivors to know that embrace that as part of our journey, that we have been through abuse, and that is part of our story. I do not recommend telling a guy that up front because my therapist told me that my therapist is sitting nearby. Anyway, sorry, it will told me that if you tell people up front, they're going to see you as somebody they can take advantage of, possibly. So be very careful with that. But as you get into the relationship, they're going to need to know that, yes, I have been through a really abusive marriage and I have triggers. And if somebody who loves you is going to want to walk with you through that. But if they say that's not part of their journey and they're not willing to walk with you through that, that's not your guy. Let them go. Don't convince them otherwise. But that has to be somebody that loves and accepts that part of you, because that
Mhm.
is your journey. That is your story. And if they're committing to walk with you in that, they need to be prepared for how that is going to impact your relationship as you process and learn together. And that goes both ways, which I was going to ask Tabitha about too. It's also being willing to understand their journey, because
Mhm.
they're going to have a journey too. And you need to know what their journey is and what you might face in your marriage because of their journey. And you need to decide, is this something I'm willing to walk through and walk with them through? And sometimes two people's journeys may not be a good fit for each other. And that's okay. Like, it's just somebody with a certain background. I don't know, maybe their background was they struggle with anger or whatever it was back in the day. And, their responses would not work well in a relationship with me and my triggers. And so it's important to understand you are walking with this person and their background and what they've been through. And are you ready to embrace them? And are they ready to embrace you? Do you have anything else more, Tabitha, you would like to add to that?
Yeah. Look, man, especially as like older people, right, who are not in college. I mean, maybe you are still in college, maybe you went back to college, but I'm just saying, like, most of us who end up outside of an abusive relationship are like 30s and up, I would say, in a lot of ways. Now, again, that's not everybody. And it's hard to talk about this because I think people are in different life stages. So I want to be mindful. I would say when you are an older dater, right? When you're outside of college and have been married, maybe have kids, and so you're an older dater, whatever older is to you, then you're going to find people who have baggage and who have stuff, because we all have stuff. What are they doing with their stuff is the question that I have. So if they had a problem with anger, or if they had a problem with maybe compulsive sexual behavior, pornography, something like that, what have they done about it? Are they in active recovery? Are they, have they done the work of healing for themselves if they came out of an abusive home, for example, right? Like there are plenty of men who grew up in abusive homes. There are plenty of men who had abusive parents and had to reckon with that. There are men that have had abusive wives. And so how are they healing and doing their work, and what does that look like? And I think those are just really honest conversations to have. And realistically, stuff's going to come up in relationships. How do they handle conflict? How do they handle, when they are triggered by something, and how do they then approach you? Are they willing, when I'm working with a couple, we call it accepting influence. Are they willing to accept influence from you and to say, hey, like, man, when you talk like that, it really is really hard for me to hear. It makes me feel a lot inside, and I understand where it's coming from you, but like, it's not working. Are they willing to hear that and move toward, a compromise place, like with you? Are they willing to say like, oh, I totally get that. And, here's what's going on for me. Are you willing to also accept influence? And again, that's not accepting influence is not being dominated, right? It's that place of compromise where it's like, hey, I really have a hard time if you want me to wake up before 8 a.m. Whereas I'm the type of person who's up at 5, and so, if they're a little bit of a grump fish when they wake up earlier than 8, can I be kind to that? Knowing that, like, if I need something done at 11 p.m., they are my person, right? Like that, and again, how do we enter into that together? How do we work through those things together? And how are they doing on their healing journey is really important.
Wow. All of those are really good. And then I kind of want to just always go here because I know you feel comfortable going here. Let's talk a little bit about their past and their background as far as sexuality. I think that's a really important thing that has to be discussed in dating. Like, what are your boundaries and things like that? And so let's kind of talk a little bit more about that. How do you approach that in dating, Tabitha? What do you recommend somebody to do?
I think be clear, first of all, what your boundaries are in terms of physical contact and, sexual touch of any kind, right? And sexual touch is not necessarily like intercourse. And I mean, it is, and it's also other things, right? So where are your boundaries at? Are you okay holding hands or being hugged or having an arm around you? Or are you okay with kissing? Those are things that you want to kind of flesh out for yourself first, and that you definitely want to share with this other person. I would say that for me, I'm a ring and a ceremony kind of girl, which means I'm not going to have any sexual, intercourse with anybody until I'm married to them. So that's me. And that's an important thing for people to know up front. And you will weed people out rather quickly with that, for sure. But then I think there's other conversations that you have about, what are the sexual expectations in a marriage, and have they experienced sexual harm or sexual addiction in their past? Like, what is it like for them? Have you, and how does that, show up for you in a relationship potentially? And these are, honestly, if you're thinking about marrying somebody, premarital counseling that is good, not maybe the stuff you got when you got married before, but actual good premarital counseling that's going to go the hard places, is really super important, because it's going to help you guys talk through those issues and what may come up in marriage. And then if you are married, what are what comes up in the bedroom for you? What is challenging or difficult or scary? And, where is maybe the past showing up for either of you? And how you're relating. And that is another good place to get some counseling, to talk through, like, here are the struggles we're having in the bedroom. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. They're like, I don't want to talk about that. But man, clear is kind. And these are conversations that we should be having with our spouse. How else are you going to know what someone else likes if you don't actually talk about it? Yeah. I think that is a tough thing, but we've been very conditioned, especially in the church, to not say these things out loud. And I think it's really helpful. I'm not talking about salacious conversations. I'm talking about honoring, kind, clear conversations about touch and sex. And, and again, sexual intimacy is so much more than just intercourse. Relational intimacy is so much more than sexual anything. How are those things being wrestled out? and what are people's expectations and rhythms and things like that you just need to talk through.
Mm-hmm. Wow, those are all really good things. I'm learning a lot as always. And so my next question for you, I want to kind of clarify some things, and that is, what would you say would be good expectations to understand if somebody else is walking truly in sexual purity, if that's important to you? And I don't mean sexual purity is in a purity culture type thing, but I mean they're submitted to God and they're trying to honor God with their sex life and how they live that out. What are some good indicators that somebody is really surrendered to God in the area of their lives and are really trying to walk in purity towards other people?
Yeah. The way that I term it, and I did write a book about, healthy sexuality for women who have been abused and have been through, sexual harm. It really is looking at it from what is a biblical sexual ethic. And that is not a legalistic space, first of all. It is one where you talk through some of the more challenging topics and really look at, how things that you've been exposed to have maybe influenced like your arousal template, which is like what turns you on and all of that stuff. So those are conversations that you're having. As you get deeper in, this is not a second date conversation. Let me just say that. Like,
Yeah.
this is like, you might be my person. Like, we probably should talk about some of these things down the line. Right now, the boundaries on intimacy are up front out of the gate. Like, you try to make a pass at me, like we're gonna have problems kind of deal. Like, like, don't put your hands there. Nope. No, thank you. Those are early on boundaries, right? But then as you were like, man, this might be my person, like, we need to talk about some of these things. How is, stuff from the past showing up in the present, if it is, and what are their struggles and what are their views on pornography and on, different things. I think there's just places to talk about that and the why of it. And again, they're going to be respectful of you. You're going to hear from them like, hey, I maybe did. And look, it is so common for men to have looked at pornography at points in their life, and hopefully the ones that had a struggle with it and were like, because there are guys that are like, that's not for me, that's weird, they never got into that. I know that doesn't feel like it when we listen to a lot of survivors, because that's not usually our experience. We get all the sex addicts who are also abusers, but there are guys who are like, yeah, I looked at it once and it was dumb. And you're like, well, alrighty then. They do exist. I know it's hard to believe.
I have met people like that, so I agree with you.
Yeah. But then, like, if a guy did struggle with it, what do they do to overcome it? Like, is it white knuckle sobriety, which is not sober, like, which is not recovery, frankly. It's just like, I'm not doing the thing, but where else is the thing showing up, And so really having those conversations, and it's nuanced because it's going to be individual to the individual, and seeing kind of what is happening there for them and what answers are you getting. Again, if they're overall honest and transparent and kind and, genuine, and they're not shady and lying and subversive and slippery, you're going to know. You're going to know that, hey, this is a really honest conversation about this. And, they're going to be upfront with their struggles and what they're doing to address them. And then you get to make informed choices.
Yes. Is there any red flags that you would say if you hear somebody talking about I know for me up front, I like to know those things early on. Like, what is your sexual background and your history? Because if you're been married before, you've got some form of background, whatever. Most people do. Anyway, so what are some red flags when it comes to that? And how soon should you have that conversation with somebody? I guess there's a couple questions there. I'll just let you.
Yeah. The how soon is it depends. This is the therapist answer. It depends. It depends on, again, like if I go out on a first date with somebody, I'm like, you are a slime bucket. Like, there's no need to ask anything else. I'm not seeing them again. I'm like, thanks, good luck, not me. So I think sometimes you don't need to have the conversation because you have yeeted them out of your life before, there was even a need. And I think, again, it really depends on how do you hear them talking about women? How do you hear them talking about their past? How do you hear them talking about you? And if they ask you questions about your prior relationships, how do they handle that? How do they, honor and protect and care for you in those conversations as well? So I think it's really more than just like a what do you say, what do you ask? It's who is this person? Are they a man of integrity and honesty and character, or are they, slippery when you ask questions or not wanting to tell you important things? If every ex they ever had was crazy, I don't think it's the exes unless they just really can't pick them, but then you're going to see other signs. Again, all these things are patterns, right? We're looking at it holistically. So if they did meet every crazy woman on the face of God's green earth and they really are like, I got some therapy, so I'd stop that, and then like you see that genuineness, like, okay, maybe, but like I'd still have some questions. I just want to be sure. But again, and you don't have to move fast. I think this is a big misnomer amongst Christians, is like, I got to figure it out. I got to figure out if they're the one, and we got to check off some boxes. And it's like, man, no, like, get to know someone. This, first of all, this is not McDonald's. We are not ordering up Mr. Right. Secondly, like, let's slow it down and really take the time to get to know. And a man who will allow you to get to know them and is willing to go slow is at least a decent prospect.
Wow. Well, you've given me so much stuff to think about. And I know with other people too, you just say it so well. And I have such wonderful conversations with you. I feel like I learn a lot. And I'm like, wow, the way she said that is just so profound. And it just explains how I feel inside. So I'm very excited about everything you shared today and appreciate you so much for coming here and joining us. I'm like, wow, we've been here for almost an hour. So it's been a wonderful conversation and it went by way too fast. So I hope everybody here enjoyed it. And if you love Tabitha like I do, guess what, guys? You get to see her at our 2025 Women's Retreat. I will drop a link for that in the comments. I will have her back before the retreat to talk about her topic at the retreat. But yes, it's sign up. There's open registration still, obviously. So now's the time to jump on that. It's going to be a wonderful retreat with Leslie Vernick and many other people there. So hope to see y'all guys there and hope everybody has a wonderful day. Tabitha, do you want to say anything as you're closing out?
Yeah. Don't give up on healthy relationships, whether it be friendships or intimate partners. Well, intimate partner, you shouldn't have more than one of those. And if you're thinking about the retreat and you're like, man, I don't know if I'd fit in. I don't feel like I fit in anywhere. You're absolutely going to fit in. It is such a wonderful group of women, such a wonderful group of speakers coming. And in the men that are in attendance, and I do want to say this, there's going to be some guys there. We have some pastors that show up. I'm speaking with a guy. They are safe men who have been assessed and vetted for their safety. And I just want to say that because I know that can be so hard, because it can be so hard to trust anybody, that it has the male chromosomal set there. And I get it. I get that fear. And I just want you to know, like, we really do, I've been coming to the retreat and been part of the retreat for, I don't even know how many years now. It's been a lot. And it truly is a place of healing. I have seen the Holy Spirit do wild and wonderful things in my sisters there. And I'm really excited for what the Lord is going to do this year. So if you're like on the fence and you're like, I don't know, man, I don't seem to fit any place, you will fit here. Please come. We would love to see you.
Yes. Well, yes, we absolutely would love to have you and look forward to meeting you. So come up and say hello to us. I want to meet you personally. If you heard this and we're like, I decided to come to the retreat, please come tell me. I am to come tell Tabitha. You would make our whole day. So hope y'all guys have a wonderful day and we'll see y'all guys soon. Goodbye.